Our our second speaker tonight is Rudo Kemper, and he's a geographer and technologist with over a decade of experience supporting indigenous communities in mapping and monitoring their lands. His professional experience includes field work in communities all over the world, and he's currently the technical steward and steering the direction of several digital mapping tools and platforms, including Terra Stories, the Earth Defenders Toolkit, the Guardian Connector, and Native Land Digital. Rudo?
All right. Thank you, Ian, and good evening to you all. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Rudo, and I'm part of a community of practice of technologists and community practitioners who are working with indigenous communities to co-create technologies that help them defend their land and maintain data sovereignty. So my current organization, Conservation Metrics, is part of this, and I'm sure many of you also know Awana Digital, who were formerly known as Digital Democracy, as fellow DWeb veterans who have been here many times and have shared some of the stories of working with community. And today, I've actually been invited by a Maasai community organization based in Tanzania to share with you some, frankly, disconcerting kind of updates of what is happening in their lands in Tanzania, but also how they are using this amazing decentralized mapping tool called Mapeo to defend their lands against some large-scale incursions that I'll tell you about. So,
Down here.
oh, well, that worked too. So, pretty much since 2022, over 100,000 indigenous Maasai pastoralists have been forcibly displaced from their land by the Tanzanian government in the name of conservation. So basically what's been happening is that the government has been establishing protected areas, and instead of involving the communities who have lived there for thousands of years, right, who are the stewards of this landscape, they have forcibly removed these communities in order to build infrastructure so that tourists from wealthy countries can come there and hunt animals. Can you think of anything more heinous? It's really quite chilling. So the Maasai have been, since that time, displaced. As you can, this is a picture depicting some of that. And it's impacting the community themselves, but it also has ramifications for the ecosystem, which you're seeing in the photo of the kind of savanna landscape of East Africa. Because the Maasai, like many indigenous peoples across the world, right, have this intimate connection to the land that has been founded for millennia of living there and their livelihoods being dependent, right, on the land. And so they have this immense traditional knowledge that is embedded in their songs, in their stories, in their spiritual practices, that is really deeply connected to this land. So when you remove the community, you also remove all of that that comes along with that, and the sense of stewardship that this community feels for this landscape, right? And this is happening all over the world with indigenous communities who are losing that connection to land, and as a consequence, we all then suffer the consequences when it comes to the climate future of these landscapes being destroyed over time. And in the case of the Maasai, it's not just a fiction that they're facing. Their households have been burnt down. Their cattle have been poisoned. Their waterways have been poisoned. Their roads have been destroyed in this process. So, and this is called fortress conservation, where you build conservation areas as a fortress, and the philosophy is to keep people out. So this is what's happening as we speak in Tanzania. So I personally first heard about this when I was in 2022 in a workshop with the Ogiek of Mount Elgon in Kenya. So the Ogiek in Kenya are facing similar things, you know. They're also having human rights violations. The government has denied them claim over their land as well. And so they wanted to have access to a mapping tool that would enable them to map out not only the extent of their land and their kind of traditional knowledge of the territory, which is a kind of evidence, right, of their tenure in the land, but also some of these human rights violations. Their homes were also being burned down. And so they wanted to have access to a tool, a mapping tool that they could teach to the community who is not like us. There's many things that we all take for granted about data and technology that the communities do not. And so it has to be relatively simple to use. And like so many indigenous communities across the world that are living outside of internet connectivity, needed something that could work entirely offline. And so I was involved in a training for a tool called Mapeo, and there were actually two Maasai that were present observing, and I learned from their testimony of what was going on. So that was the first time that they learned about Mapeo as well. So Mapeo is really quite amazing if anybody's worked with it. And here's a picture of two indigenous Guajajara land defenders in Brazil that are using it. So it was like a big part of our philosophy is co-creation, right? So really actively working with communities to understand their needs and then co-developing that technology, you know, as we are working with the community directly. And so out of that came a lot of interesting learnings, right, of what a technology for indigenous communities should look like. One thing is that it's easy to use, customizable, translatable. Language is a hugely important component there. But another interesting thing that came out is actually decentralized. Because for communities, they don't have a central server, right? They don't have access to the internet. And so for them, and also for communities in the Amazon that we were working with at the time, knowledge is collective. It's shared by everybody, right? That's how it's always been. And so for that reason, Mapeo was developed with a peer-to-peer protocol in order for the data to be centralized and living on everybody's device instead of being stored in just one place. Yeah. And I've personally trained communities in Mapeo in 4 continents, and I'm always amazed by how quickly people run with it, how basically people just train each other in using it, and in just a few days of training, people are so well equipped to be able to collect data. And so this amazing, beautiful map was created by the Waorani community in Ecuador. After several years of collecting data using Mapeo, they were able to produce this amazing map which features, you know, traditional names, it features the locations of animals, of sacred sites, resources, ancestral paths. All of this information was documented. And what's amazing is this map was actually used in court in Ecuador in a lands rights case that was shown and ended up being a pivotal part of evidence that enabled them to win a court case for their land rights. So a major, major success story. And many communities have learned about this and become inspired to then also go on to use the tool, which has been awesome. So the Maasai also heard about the tool via the Ogiek. And in this year, Awana Digital, my colleagues, they gave a training in a kind of an emergency response to everything that's happening and how to use the tool. So a number of community members, including men, women, youth, elders, were all trained in using the tool and then started to train others, just like has been done in many places elsewhere. Oops, that is the wrong button. And until today, actually, the community has managed to collect thousands of points already. The Maasai territory is vast, by the way. It's millions and millions of hectares in Tanzania. And so they've only just begun this work, but already a ton has been established. And what they are doing today is actually synthesizing some of this information and preparing it for court, for legal purposes, and also for advocacy campaigns. And so already a tremendous amount of progress has been made. And here you actually see a picture of some of the mapping. And what's really kind of cruel is this volcano that you see in the background here. This is the volcano of Ngorongoro, which is a sacred site, and the community has actually been banned from going there. And this is one of their places that has the most significance for one of their cultural rituals. So some of this actually took place clandestine in terms of the mapping that happened there, which you can see Mapeo on the right here, and some of the points that were kind of meticulously collected. But this is just the beginning. It's a small part of a larger journey of being able to establish an archive and a repository of information that will help them eventually win court cases to get their land back. The stakes are, quite frankly, high, and there's been a lot of Maasai land defenders whose lives have been threatened and who've had to flee the country. And I'm actually not able to name any of the community organizations that are working on this or any of the people, but they actually have given permission for me to share this story with you today at DWeb specifically because of the plight that they are undergoing and also because of the value of a decentralized tool and how it's actually currently being able to make a difference for this community and their fight for their land. In closing, we're not done. There's a lot more that needs to get done. The community has more mapping to do. There's a massive extent of their territory, and also the tools themselves need continued maintenance and support and love to thrive. So I'd like to end by asking you if you're inspired by this story, and if you would like to donate. Awana Digital has set up a website at awana.digital/dweb. There's a QR code, and we also have postcards that we can give out. where the money will go directly to the support of the Maasai community that we are working with, if you feel so inspired. And I'll be around all week as well to talk about any of this if you'd like to know more. And with that, I will thank you for your attention and say good night.